Welcome to this Andreas NLP video podcast, fulfilling the goals of internal family systems, IFS, and taking things a step farther with core transformation. I'm Tamara Andreas, co-author of the book Core Transformation and also international trainer for Core Transformation, the Wholeness Work, and NLP. And I'm delighted to introduce and welcome back Stephen Josephs, who has over 40 years experience as a highly successful executive coach. And he also has extensive experience with parts work models. We'll get into what that is in a little bit. And in particular, he has experience with both core transformation and IFS, or internal family systems. At the end, we're going to have a Q&A. So if you have a question, feel free to add this into chat at any time. So, Stephen, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, awesome. And would you tell us all, just briefly, what is IFS?
Well, I think IFS and core transformation are similar in that they're parts models. And the idea is that we have parts of us that are sometimes in conflict that sort of navigate our experience through life. So when people have, for instance, an unwanted behavior, they can say, well, there's part of me that wants to just binge eat. And then there's another part of me that feels ashamed about it. And then, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea that there are these parts of self is what's really central to parts work. And the other thing that's central about it is that these parts in a therapeutic setting are considered to have positive intentions. And we'll get a little bit more into that, but that's the big breakthrough that parts work makes for people, that they can embrace parts of themselves that they used to shun or try to get away from, and those parts end up controlling the show when you do that.
Okay, yeah, great. And now let's talk about specifically what is core transformation, and you have an example to share.
Well, did you mean the example of how I was working with IFS?
Oh, no, I mean the example of core transformation with sarcasm.
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
So I had the context that I work in is mostly executive coaching. And for people who are in leadership positions, often through 360 feedback or something else, it comes back to them that there's some behavior that people don't respond well to. And this particular client was brought to the table the idea that he is occasionally sarcastic in a way that can really hurt people. And in this particular case, he was sarcastic in response to someone mischaracterizing his work. And so he wanted to find out if we could improve this, that it was an unwanted behavior for him. And so what do you have the, yeah, that's exactly what I want.
Yeah, there we go.
So yeah, so this is the series of kind of inquiries that he went through, trying to find out what the intended outcome of his sarcasm actually was. So here we have sarcasm, and if you get rapport with that part and just sort of interview it and try to find out what it's really after, you can just ask the part what it wants. And so we did that, and here's what it said. It said it wanted to retaliate. And so, let's see. So at first it wanted to retaliate, and then you can ask it, well, if it was able to achieve retaliation fully and completely, what would it want that was even more important than that? And then we get to set the record straight. And then you can further ask them, if you achieve that, does that part want something that's even more important to it, and it's get them to back down? And so through that series of questions, we got more, and eventually it got to where that part, what it wanted to do was just relax and get to a place of peace ultimately. And do you have something to say about this, Tamara?
Yeah, I'll just chime in here. So when we do core transformation with any part, no matter what it starts with on the surface, and it could be even like something really intense like anxiety or, a very strong emotional feeling that is not at all peaceful. No matter what we start with, we end up at something like peace, what we call a core state. And so core transformation takes this inner part on an inner journey to discover the deepest yearning of this inner part. And it's always something like peace or oneness, love, fullness, presence, wholeness. And there are other words, of course, that can come up. And it's a state that's beyond having or doing or knowing or interacting with the world. It just is. And we call this the core state. And this core state has a tremendous healing potential. It has a great power of transformation. So, Stephen, I'll let you go ahead then and take over for what did you do next?
Well, what happened was, I guess I want to say is that in internal family systems, you don't routinely get to a core state. So if that part that was sarcastic said that it wanted to retaliate, one of the moves in internal family systems, which is very interesting and very good, you can say that part, well, if it didn't do its job at retaliation, then what is it afraid would happen? And often that goes to a part that's very vulnerable, that needs to be protected in some way. And so this sequence of things that you see before you on your screen wouldn't necessarily happen with internal family systems. So there was one point, this is how this all came to be. My interaction with internal family systems was I was on a call of internal family systems for business. And in that call, we ended up splitting it into dyads and doing work with each other. So I coached someone and I used this method for someone they were talking about how they related. She was talking about how she related to her husband. She wanted to be in a much better place. And she had some kind of sequence of intended outcomes, just like what you see before you, but she eventually got to a core state. And then we integrated that core state in a way that was very, very effective for her in a short amount of time. It took about 20 minutes. And when she got back to the group, when we had groups sharing, she said, wow, Stephen just coached the shit out of me. And everyone laughed. And then somebody said, well, maybe he can come back and teach us in some further meeting down the road about how we coach the way he coached her. And so what was different about what she experienced that was not the same as what would normally happen in internal family systems is she got to this core state. And that core state is sort of wonderfully nurturing and sort of opening to ways of being in the world that are very satisfying and very fulfilling. So that's the part that core transformation adds. And there's more that it does after that. And I'm sure Tamara can explain some of that. But this is the main point of departure, that you didn't have to work with a protective part and an exile, which is the sort of hurt part, that in a way you could go to a place that was supremely positive and almost sublime as an experience. And that is the core state. So I'm going to hand it back to you, Tamara. What have you got to say about this?
Yes, that I think you've really hit the nail on the head there as far as what does core transformation bring to somebody with an IFS background. So people with an IFS background already have a lot of that we teach. They already have an ability to approach their inner parts, to understand their experience in terms of parts. So, in fact, let's talk next about what are the three main ways that core transformation is aligned with IFS. We've already mentioned that they're both parts methods. They both work in terms of parts, and they both assume that each part has a positive purpose. And something that I've really found is that IFS people who come to our trainings, that's just second nature to them. It's like they already get this deep respect for our inner parts, and they already get that every part is positive and brings something positive. And that's really a great leg up for somebody learning core transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And then so that's two ways that they're aligned: parts work and positive purpose. And then what would you say, Stephen, is the third way that they're aligned?
Well, I think if you watch Dick Schwartz work with someone who is the founder of Internal Family Systems, his presence is really remarkable. He's absolutely relaxed, and it's as though, and I don't think it's just as though, it's really true, that he has confidence that whatever comes up in that person, that he can handle it. He can handle it because he's seen it in his own self-work. And he can handle it because he's in a state that is totally allowing and welcoming anything that a part could bring. He wrote a book called No Bad Parts. And I think the same is true when you watch someone who does core transformation. And the interesting thing is that for in both of these systems, working on yourself is very, very important, because if you have confidence that there is a self that's that's really indestructible, and from that place, in internal family systems, they talk about self-leadership. From that place, you can relate to your parts or to other people's parts in a way that accepts them and can work with them, no matter what they bring to the table. That's where core.
Go ahead.
I would say that's where core transformation and internal family systems are very, very similar. And I think the other thing is that as a therapist working in both systems, we used to call it in psychodrama the self as instrument. The more work you do on yourself, the better you are at doing your therapeutic work, because you're not afraid of anything that comes up.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen, for making this point. And I agree that that's something that I notice as well, is that the people with both, for sure, when we teach core transformation, we have a very strong emphasis on self-work, we could say, or inner work for ourselves. And what I tell people is, when they're first learning core transformation, they want to get good at guiding others. What's the best way I can improve? Well, that's number one, or at least amongst the very top ones, is to do work with yourself. And I think the reason it's so important with core transformation is that we're really guiding people to an experience that may be new territory for them. Some people at least say, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that I had a capacity to have this experience, this sense of beingness, or whatever it is. And so if we're guiding someone to this possibly new territory, if we're able to go there ourselves with them, then that makes us much more effective as a guide. And then plus, it's just great that we can get benefits ourselves, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just
Yeah,
it's not just all for the clients, right?
I think what was important for the people on that IFS call that we later did, explaining core transformation to them, was that these people were executive coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And with their clients, they didn't want to automatically always go to reparative work with an exile. They wanted to go to these positive states. And when you're working with people who are leaders in business or something like that, they don't necessarily want to do therapy with every session or feel like they're dealing with some wounded childhood part of themselves. And so one of the things that core transformation adds to the equation is that there's this positive place to go to that can almost routinely, that you could count on any part to lead you there.
That's right. Yeah, and it's a very reliable step-by-step way of getting there with any part. And so it really, I think it's kind of a shortcut to healing. It gets us directly to a healing state reliably with every part. And so Stephen, when you were doing this introduction then to your business group, you were telling me that you also offered some free sessions to 5 people, however many would sign up to 5. And so I'm wondering, what kind of reaction did you get, or how did people respond to the core transformation that they were learning or that they were experiencing through your guiding?
Well, I think they really responded to the experience of finding a core state for themselves, because I think they were more used to finding something that needed to be repaired. And although core transformation does reparative work, it does it from a very positive sort of posture. For instance, a lot of people are used to the idea of, you have an internal critic and how you're going to deal with it. But they're not as used to the idea of actually what the internal critic is looking for is some sublime state, which is really their natural state. And there is a kind of meta learning that happens when you do core transformation over and over, because what you're being shown with example after example is that there is this core state that's sort of the ultimate intended outcome for any part. So if you do that enough, you get the idea that that really that your self is organized in such a way that this core state or core states are really part of your ongoing experience of yourself, and you can just relax about that. And because core transformation reliably delivers that over and over, that meta learning gets more and more real for people. And I think that's what happened when I worked with people, is that they got more and more confidence that this core state was really them.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful experience to have.
And in addition, the more that we do core transformation, the more we have a sense of well-being in an ongoing way in our lives. And so it's not just when we're sitting down to do core transformation work, it becomes an ongoing experience. And so people actually, not all the time, but from time to time, people report that they got changes in other areas of their life that they didn't even work with. They didn't, like, there's an example that comes to mind of somebody who she had an issue with money, where she would spend money too much and just to get a temporary high. She was living paycheck to paycheck because she was kind of an impulsive buyer, we could say. And she never even worked with this, because she told me later that she probably didn't even believe it could change, So she went through the core transformation foundation seminar, and worked with other things. And then after a few months went by, she noticed that her bank balance was going up. And she realized that this behavior had changed because she now had this ongoing sense of well-being that was just there already. So she didn't need to spend money to get that temporary high. And she got this change without even working with the part of her that had been getting her to spend money.
Mm-hmm.
And so that ongoing sense of well-being can be, for people's experience can vary, of course, but for many people, that's even more of value than whatever it was that we were specifically working with and wanting to change.
Yeah, that's a wonderful example. And I think what it leads me to is the idea about what do you do with yourself to really work with yourself or work with your parts. And there's another difference here between what people in internal family systems do and core transformation. So the idea of that there is this self that's kind of indestructible and at peace with the world. And from that place, you can work with your parts. So in internal family systems, a lot of the meditations that I've listened to really get you to calm down and just be in that self with a capital S. And from that place, you're sort of building your confidence in that experience. And you're really asking your parts at that point to just kind of leave you alone so that you can deepen your experience of this self. Whereas in core transformation, if you're doing work on yourself, any part can lead you to that sense of an expanded self. So rather than just saying, hey, don't bother me, I'm just trying to be in myself, in core transformation, it's anything that arises can lead you to that place because they all include in themselves that self. I don't know if that was clear, but
yeah. No, I think it was, and also we have a reliable way of getting there. So each inner part of us can become a major source of what we could call self-energy or core state. And so we're using these terms self-energy and core state, and I think that they're maybe the same thing, or at least very much akin to each other. When Richard Schwartz talks about the 8 C's of self-energy, it's the same things that we find naturally, just pour out of that experience of the core state, like compassion and curiosity and confidence, and he has 8 of those. I don't have that at my fingertips right now, but any IFS person, I'm sure, knows what I'm talking about here. And people might be wondering, so if I already have an IFS background, then how do I work core transformation in? And so I wanted, actually, there's somebody who wrote to me in the last week or two who has been trained in both methods, IFS and core transformation. She wrote to me because she knew this podcast was coming up, and she's been following our podcast. And so what she said is that she uses some things that she learned in IFS, for example, to explain to clients about inner conflicts, what those are, how they work, and also to organize her work with parts. And sometimes she asks her parts, or she has the person ask parts questions that come from IFS. However, she uses core transformation as her method of transformation and for healing parts. So that's what she uses for healing parts, because of that we can help the part reach the core state. And that just is such a healing state. So it makes the healing happen much more reliably. And then also she finds doing core transformation to be less cognitive, and so she's able to engage the unconscious more. So that's one example of how somebody who has been trained in both methods, uses core transformation for what it brings that's unique, for healing parts in a way that's just very direct and reliable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there are some other things that help someone with an IFS background expand their capacity to help people. So we've talked about getting to a core state, but then core transformation does a lot with that core state that isn't available in IFS. So for instance, you have this core state, and if you're familiar with Qigong or energy or something like that, you're familiar with the idea of taking the energy of that core state and bringing it all the way through your body, into your bones, into your marrow, into your whole system as a way of healing. And also you can also, in core transformation, grow up apart. You can also do things like look at the whole timeline of your experience in life and revisit places along your timeline with the core state. And so, it has some very specific and highly effective moves that I don't find in IFS in the same way.
Yeah, that's true. It does go beyond the core state. Now, and one thing too that I think is really important. So of all the parts work models that I'm familiar with and that I've even remotely heard about, there's really only a very small number that involve integrating parts. And so with the idea that the parts model is a great map for problems that we have. Anytime we have, I can say there's a behavior that happens and I don't like it. That lets us know there's a part involved, because I don't like it, but it happens. So it's not all of me that generates it. It's a part of me that is creating this kind of problem experience. And so it's great to be able to heal this part. However, then we can take things a step further and actually integrate these parts. And so what we find with core transformation is that once a part gets to the core state and it's evolved up through time, up to the present, then it just doesn't need to be separate any longer. So it can be welcomed back into the whole, like a drop coming back into the ocean. And then that allows us to go through life as a whole being, increasingly as a whole being. And it is not the same as what they talk about in IFS about blending, like a part being blended with the self. It's a true integration of what used to be separate. Now it's one. It's one. It's like in spiritual circles, we talk about being one with everything around us. This is being one with ourselves, being a whole being within our own experience. Yeah. And so that way we can go through life rather than being a committee of parts, even if we get them all getting along well, communicating well with each other. It's different to have an experience of being a committee of parts as compared to a sense of wholeness. Would you say so, Stephen? What's your experience with this?
Well, I think in IFS, there's this idea that parts never go away, and that we're born with parts and we'll die with parts, but occasionally Dick ventures into the land that you just described and talks about this this place of integration. I don't know what's true about that, but I do know that if you believe one or believe the other, it leads you to different kinds of experiences with yourself. And for me personally, I'm much more interested in identifying or just moving through the world as this self that's integrated.
Yeah.
And so, and just a little shout out to Wholeness work takes that and carries it even further. So a lot of people who do core transformation and get very good at it eventually get attracted to Wholeness work, which is even is another way of exploring and experiencing that undivided self.
Yes, and it's a deep transformation model also developed by Connirae Andreas. Connirae Andreas developed both core transformation and the wholeness work and other things too. And yeah, and the wholeness work is, it really allows us to experience a shift in consciousness. It's very complementary to both core transformation and to IFS. And yeah, usually it's easier to start with core transformation for most people, although you can start in either place. And so that's why we're focusing this really mostly on core transformation. And it's nice to also mention that the wholeness work is there, and it also is very complementary for this healing journey. Yeah, and you mentioned, Stephen, that Stephen Schwartz, or excuse me, Stephen Schwartz, that Richard Schwartz sometimes alludes to something that could be considered to be integration. And so I want to just read a quote that I found in his book of No Bad Parts in chapter 8. And so he's talking about flow states, and he said, I believe that flow states are examples of when all your parts are fully aligned with the purpose or pleasure of the activity, so their selves meld with yours. In a sense, they temporarily dissolve and you are in a non-dual wave state, even though you are still operating in this world. So I think that he's had experiences that are at least very similar to what we're talking about when we're talking about integration of parts. It's just that he's saying they temporarily dissolve. We find that when a part has been guided to experience its core state fully, and it's evolved up through time, that it can dissolve, it can integrate in a way that is actually permanent. Now, when I say dissolve, that doesn't mean that we're getting rid of anything or losing anything, because all the resources that were present in the separate part, as the integration happens, these resources are available now to the whole. And so we can just draw on those resources whenever they're relevant, whenever we want them. They're there easily.
So that reminds me, I was talking before watching Dick Schwartz's work, and he works quite beautifully. Connirae, when you watch her work is informed by the consciousness that you just described. And so Connirae ends up saying things like, when she's talking about how she works, that she is sitting in this field of awareness that is this big self that Dick would also recognize. And she says that this field of awareness, which she is at the moment, falls in love with everything it encounters. So just think about that. If you're walking around the world and have periodically, or even in some sustained way, this feeling that you are this field that can encounter and appreciate and love everything that arises within it, then you are at this kind of unified state. And I think core transformation and wholeness work, they get at it from a little bit different angle, but the result is really the same, and the intent is also the same. And so I think it's great to watch Dick work, because you get the idea of the power of internal family systems. And then when you watch Connirae Andreas work, you get sort of more of a hit of joy that comes through her work, and appreciation. And also, back to being a practitioner, if that's the state that you're in order to work with your people and help them evolve, then there's no therapeutic burnout, or that's much less of a factor, because in order to actually be helpful, you have to be in a state that's hugely nurturing, not only for your client, but for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And what's wonderful about core transformation and the wholeness work as well is that we can all get there. We can all get to this state that we can be in as we live life. And we can be in this state of love and appreciation as we're working with others. Increasingly, the more that we use these methods for ourselves. And so yeah. So there's another question I wanted to bring to you, Stephen. If somebody has an IFS background, what do they need to know or to do in order to get the most out of core transformation?
Well, I think, the first thing that came to mind is they should find some core transformation practitioner and experience it for themselves. They should and there are plenty of people online or through Andreas NLP that are available for that. Mm-hmm. And so I think, it's just what the Buddha said to his practitioners: don't believe anything I say, experience it for yourself. So take something that you've been working on, noodling on, some problem, some place you'd like to evolve, or some area that you'd like to expand into, and see how core transformation works for you. And I think that's the best thing. And if you like it, then of course there's a wonderful book, Core Transformation, which really leads you through it step by step and in a way that makes it very practical. And then you can get a feel for what it's like. But I have to say that IFS people are who are familiar with their own model are perfect, poised to just expand what they're capable of doing by adding core transformation. So it's not really one or the other, but I hope what people are feeling through this particular podcast is that core transformation actually brings some things that are unique and gives you, as a practitioner, skills and capacities that you wouldn't ordinarily have through IFS. And yet it doesn't conflict with IFS in any way.
Great. Yeah, I agree that the way to really get core transformation is to experience it. And in just a moment, I'm going to share some resources for this, including a free resource that can help people to begin to dip their toe in the water and to have a full experience of the benefits themselves. So so in just a moment, we're going to do a Q&A. And so if you haven't already put any question into chat, go ahead and put something in if something's come to mind. And first, though, I'm going to go over resources. So how to learn more about core transformation. In the description below the video are links and details. There's a free 80-minute video training on core transformation that will introduce you to core transformation, and it includes a demonstration and it includes a group guided experience. So you can experience being guided through the first few steps of the process. Then a next step that we really recommend is the Core Transformation Foundation course. And here's a way to experience it for yourself, because you get to, you'll guide others and you'll get to be guided through the process. So you get the benefits yourself. And we also are including another process called aligning perceptual positions that we haven't taken the time going into it all in this podcast. It's very complementary, and it especially helps our experience in relationship to others. And now, there are two ways to experience the foundation course. One is live online, and there's one coming up just next month. In fact, if you're watching live, your timing is perfect because there's a $100 early bird registration discount that expires in a couple of days. And so if you're considering taking this step and experiencing it for yourself, and also So whether you want personal change for yourself or if you want to guide others, either way, this is the place to start as far as, the journey of really learning and experiencing core transformation. And now, if you look into this and you discover, oh, I'd love to be there, but the dates don't work for me, well, that's not a problem, because we also have a streaming video course, and that's a recorded training of the same material from a few years ago. Now, it doesn't include, well, then you might wonder, so how will I do the exercises? We also have a practice group that meets once a week, and my co-trainer for the advanced trainings, my colleague Mark Andreas, organizes and runs the practice group and does a wonderful job with this. And so that, because it just meets once a week, it can be easier for some people to fit into their schedules. And then that way, again, they get the benefits themselves of guiding and being guided through the process. Now, we also offer advanced and coach certification training. And so if you're interested in developing a professional level of skill, then that's highly recommended. You can already get some good results just from the foundation training. And if you want to optimize your results, especially working with a whole wide range of clients and a wide range of client difficulties, then the advanced and coach certification training is especially recommended for you. And I want to let you know the timing. So we do the advanced and coach certification cycle once a year. And so we start in the spring. And so if you do the foundation course now, whether it's the streaming video course or the foundation course, and then if you jump into the practice group starting in March, if you're doing streaming video, then you'll be ready. You'll be prepared for the advanced cycle of this year. Otherwise, you can do it later and then just wait a year, and then we'll be doing it again. Okay, now there's also a short handout for an IFS practitioner. This was something that Stephen originally put together for his group of IFS in business. And I've modified it a bit since then. And you can see a Dropbox link in the description below the video, and just click the link and you'll get this. Stephen Joseph's website is stephenjosephs.com. Very easy to remember there. Okay, so now we're ready for the Q&A. And so, Erica, have you had any questions come up in chat?
Hi, yes, we have a lot of great questions.
Awesome.
And I don't even know where to begin. They're all so fascinating. So, I think a good place to start would be to ask Stephen, do you use both IFS and CT these days? And if yes, in what situations do you use IFS, and in what situations do you use CT?
I think I've learned some things from IFS about as to the example that Tamara had with explaining and framing how parts works. I think the idea of in IFS that there are different kinds of protective parts is actually something useful to pay attention to, because then it informs whether you're going to do some reparative work on a part or something like that. So I think IFS has made me more sensitive to that. I think that the core transformation, though, is something that I rely on very heavily, because I think the curative, reparative, and also generative experience of experiencing a core state and then applying it to various contexts of your life, that's wonderful. And you can include that wherever possible. So I would say I lean more heavily on core transformation once I get working with the client.
Okay. Yeah, a couple of people have asked about these protectors and exiles. If I may, I'll read what somebody wrote. If In IFS, if working with a protector or an exile, the guidance is to ask how the person feels towards this part. If the person says, I hate it, I wish I didn't, the protocol is to ask the part holding this feeling to step back, give space. If it doesn't explore the part, then it is assumed to be another protector. So with core transformation, if he understands correctly, the next step is to follow the outcome chain to get to the core state. Can you share experience about resistance, which IFS would label as protectors protecting an exile? Dick Schwartz iterates on asking the part to step back or explore.
Well,
a protector.
I think Tamara is actually better to answer. Will have a better answer than mine, or more precise. So what do you say to that, Tamara?
So yeah, what I'd say is that with core transformation, generally speaking, we go ahead and elicit the outcome chain of the part we start with, unless an objection emerges. Sometimes an objection does emerge, in which case, then we have a choice of which part to work with first. And so we may switch and work with the objecting part first, so then that can allow our work to proceed more easily and smoothly. Or sometimes a part comes up, it has a little concern, and all we need to do is, let the part know a little something about the process. Like, for example, if a part comes up and says, I just really hate this part you're working with, then we might just say, I get it. I get that you have some concerns about this part we're working with. And I want you to know that through this process, this part we're working with is going to reach something positive and wonderful. Would you be interested in just being present with us, being present and noticing what happens as we continue with the part? And often, so we don't really tell the parts to go away. If they have some, mild concern where they don't want to put a stop to the process, they're just a little concerned about something, we might just invite them to just be present and notice what happens. Because as we work with the part that we started with, then usually very quickly, in just a few steps, we get to experiences that every part agrees with. Like maybe we discover that this part wants safety. Well, that's a pretty popular thing, or we get to that this part wants to be loved. Well, pretty much all parts want to be loved. So by following the outcome chain process, then most of the time, other parts that really didn't like the part to begin with get to liking it, get to also discovering what's positive about this part. Now, that said, it's not that we always handled in this way. Sometimes if an objecting part has something, like a strong objection, like it wouldn't be safe to continue this, then most likely, in fact, I'd say definitely, if the part says it wouldn't be safe to continue, we're going to work with this part instead, the part that's objecting, to help this part get what it really wants at a deeper level. And once this part has gotten to the core state and is fully transformed with the core state, and then even at a core state level integrated with us, then we are in a really good place to pick up where we left off with the one that we had started with. So I hope that this is at least relatively clear. This that I'm talking about right now of navigating or managing a situation involving more than one part takes more than just these few sentences to really learn how to do it. However, hopefully this gives you at least the idea of what we do.
So I wanted to just add that the IFS question about how do you feel towards that part is an incredibly useful question, because what's behind it is you want to create in your client the experience of that they're relaxed and accepting. So checking in with them and finding out, are they at a place yet where all this work is going to be fruitful for them, is really a great question. So it's another contribution of IFS that is routinely asked that question.
Yeah. And I'd say, a person can get there really either way. So asking this question is one way to get there. And, there are other ways as well to get there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Erica, is there another question?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and bring this one forward kind of in the same vein, and I apologize if it's already been answered in some way, but is it possible that guiding the protector parts to a core state could help them to continue to protect you from having to feel what the exile is experiencing?
Yeah, I think, protective parts, I think of them as coping mechanisms in a way, that they learned that they needed to take on a certain role to protect you. But they were often adopted when you were a child. And that was the best choice that you had at that particular point. Once they experience a core state, and then they're asked the question of if you can experience this core state as an ongoing way of being. In other words, now that you've got this core state, how does that transform your experience of protecting in whatever way you did? And so what happens is they get new ways of protecting, and the coping mechanisms, once you take away the sort of driven and desperate quality of them, they become actual skills that you can use from time to time. But that part becomes a lot more wise about how to apply them. And so, so it's a big win for that protective part. It probably gets a little bit of a new job description, and then also feels what it's like to sort of integrate through this core state into a more unified self. So, it's just good from so many angles.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll to build on that a little bit, I like that you brought in that with core transformation, we don't take away any choices. So all of the choices, the possibilities, the skills that we have before doing core transformation, we still have them after doing core transformation. And so if there's something of value there that serves a purpose in a situation, we can still do it. And oftentimes protection is about feeling like my survival is at stake if I have this emotional experience, this hurt feeling. And so what is discovered through core transformation is this state of well-being that's indestructible, this state of well-being that can't be harmed. And so this, in many cases, then allows an experience that I don't actually need protection from this other part of myself. I can next welcome this other part of myself and help this part also to reach its healing state, to reach its deepest yearning, to reach the core state that can heal and transform the experience of it.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully said. I think that's exactly right.
Okay, so Erica, are there any other questions you'd like to bring to us? Just checking on the time. Yeah. I think this will be our last one. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. A few people liked this question. Their own experience has been that the changes created by IFS feel stickier. It feels like one has to keep repeating CT on a part for the effect to persist, while IFS creates a more lasting change. They wonder if this matches your experience or if it suggests that perhaps they're somehow doing CT wrong.
Erica, could you repeat that part about ickier? I didn't quite understand it.
I'm assuming that means that it sticks, like it creates lasting change.
IFS does?
That change is created by IFS. More lasting change.
My experience is actually opposite to that. I think IFS, with its emphasis on going and healing in exile, really greases that pathways for a lot of people. I worked with an IFS person at one point, and we talked about growing up apart. And that person said, I don't want to grow up this part. I want this part to be just remain a child. And, of course, that's fine. Anything you want to do with it. But the idea of taking these parts that are hurt and totally healing them in a very comprehensive, deep and sustained way, I think is actually better served through having that part experience in a mature way a core state. So I actually find that the more sustained healing comes through core transformation.
Now, I'd like to also add that if somebody is experiencing that they're doing core transformation and whatever it is that they're working on, the problem comes back, that often means, maybe even usually means, that there's some part that's involved with the issue that hasn't yet been included in the process. Mm-hmm. That's important to find and to include. And we do, in our advanced trainings, we emphasize this, of finding all the parts that are involved with the issue and transforming all of them. And here's just a really quick thing that everyone can do to explore what I mean by this. So everybody push your two hands together like this. Push your two hands against each other. And Stephen lets you and I not do it so that we're not setting an example. So I want people to discover this for themselves. So push your two hands together. And now stop pushing with one of your hands and notice what happens. And I'm going to guess, if this was a group of people that we could actually interact with, I'm going to guess that for some of you, when you stop pushing with one hand, the other hand also stopped pushing. And for some of you, when you stopped pushing with one hand, well, the other hand kept on pushing. And so if that's the experience, then with our parts, it's the same way with our parts. If we heal, if there's a thing happening on the inside where parts are pushing against each other, if we transform and heal and integrate one part, sometimes the other one will integrate on its own. However, if it doesn't, and if it continues to push, then the system will tend to recreate something on the other side to push back, to come back into balance. And so that's just a little bit of an experience for why it can be really important to discover and include every part that's involved with an issue. That's also, last week or 2 weeks ago, I was talking to Betsy Coos as well, and using core transformation in psychotherapy with really major issues and diagnoses that people had. And I think she'd agree with you that a key is finding the parts, finding the right parts to include in the work. And then with that, core transformation is her primary method of transformation and change. Okay, well, we're actually now running out of time. So thank you all for joining us. And thanks again, Stephen, for sharing your expertise and experience with us. And once again, this is Tamara Andreas, trainer with Andreas NLP. I've had the great pleasure of interviewing Stephen Josephs about his experience bringing core transformation to the IFS community, and what can core transformation add to somebody's skill set if they're already trained in IFS. And if you'd like to know more about what we offer at Andreas NLP, just go to andreasnlp.com. Right now, you can get the free introduction to core transformation that I've been talking about, the free training. Just go to andreasnlp.com/free. You'll see all of our free training this way. If you get on our email list, you'll be sure to get notice of more podcasts like this one, plus other offerings. Join us again in 2 weeks. I'll be sitting down with my colleague, Mark Andreas, and we'll be discussing how to transform our relationships. And we'll be talking about core transformation and more. We'll also be bringing in some other work that we do as well with relationships. So I hope to see you then.